The silence after Mrs. Henderson's passing was the loudest thing Alara had ever heard. It pressed down on the old Victorian house, thick and suffocating, filling the empty rooms where dust motes danced in the weak afternoon light filtering through lace curtains. Alara, sorting through a lifetime of teacups in the parlor, felt the weight of it in her bones. Mrs. Henderson, the reclusive, kind-hearted woman who'd lived here for 70 years, was gone. Her beloved calico cat, Marmalade, vanished the same day the ambulance took her away. Everyone assumed the heartbroken creature had simply disappeared into the grief-stricken ether, unable to face the empty house. Alara, the distant niece tasked with clearing the estate, believed it too. Until the silence cracked. It wasn't a sound, not at first. It was a vibration. A faint phantom tremor beneath the worn Persian rug near the grand cold fireplace. Alara paused, a chipped rose-patterned cup hovering in her hand. Had she imagined it? The house creaked constantly, sighing its own laments. She placed the cup down, the porcelain click unnaturally loud. Then it came again. Not a creak. A rustle. Like dry leaves skittering, but muffled, subterranean. She knelt, pressing her palm flat against the dusty rug. Nothing, just the cool, slightly uneven feel of the wide oak floorboards beneath. She sighed, chiding herself for letting the house's melancholy seep into her nerves. She was about to stand when a faint, desperate sound froze her mid-motion. A meow. Not the robust cry of a grown cat, but the thinnest, most fragile thread of sound. A whisper of life, impossibly weak, emanating from deep beneath the floorboards. It was so faint, so utterly vulnerable, that Alara's breath hitched, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Marmalade? But how? It sounded smaller. Newborn panic, cold and sharp, sliced through the dusty air. Alara scrambled back, her eyes frantically scanning the intricate pattern of the rug, searching for a seam, a loose board, anything. The sound came again, weaker still, a fading whimper that clawed at her soul. "Hold on," she whispered, her voice rough with sudden urgency. "Just hold on." She shoved the heavy rug aside, revealing the dark, polished wood. Kneeling again, she ran her fingers along the grooves between the boards, pressing, searching for weakness. The wood was old, solid, stubborn. The meow didn't return. The silence rushed back in, heavier, more accusing than before. Had she imagined it? Had grief and dust conjured phantoms? Then, movement at the edge of her vision. A cat stood in the open doorway to the hall. Not Marmalade. A ginger tom, lean and battle-scarred, one ear neatly clipped. A stray, surely. But its posture wasn't feral. It stood utterly still, its intense golden eyes fixed not on Alara, but on a specific point on the floor, just beyond the fireplace. Hearth. Its gaze held an unnerving intelligence, a silent command. It didn't approach, it simply watched, radiating a fierce protective tension. Alara followed its unwavering stare. There, near the carved wooden skirting board, where the floor met the stone hearth. One board looked slightly darker, the wood grain worn smoother. She scrambled over, ignoring the splinter that pricked her finger as she dug her nails into the narrow gap. It didn't budge. Frustration warred with rising terror. That faint cry echoed in her memory. A kitten. Trapped. Dying. The Ginger Tom let out a low, rumbling chirp, a sound unlike any cat noise she'd heard, urgent, encouraging. It took a single step forward, its eyes never leaving the spot. Alara needed tools. She bolted from the room, her footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty house, down the hall to the cluttered utility cupboard under the stairs. She wrenched it open, the smell of old paint and damp wood washing over her. A rusted claw hammer, a flathead screwdriver. They felt heavy and inadequate in her trembling hands. Back in the parlor, the Ginger Tom was gone, vanished as silently as it appeared, but the sense of its purpose lingered. Alara jammed the screwdriver's tip into the suspicious seam near the hearth. Wood groaned in protest. She levered, muscles straining. A sharp crack echoed and a long splinter tore away. She wedged the hammer's claw into the gap, pulling with all her weight. The board shifted, groaned, and finally lifted with a reluctant screech of nails pulling free. A cloud of dust and the pungent, stale smell of ancient darkness billowed up, making her cough. She shone her phone's flashlight into the gap. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a cramped, cobwebbed cavity beneath the floor. Dust lay thick on unseen pipes and the rough-hewn joists of the house's skeleton. And there, nestled against the cold stone foundation, lay a tiny, impossibly small bundle of matted tortoiseshell fur. It was motionless. Alara's heart plummeted. Too late? She reached down, her fingers brushing the cold, dusty fur. No movement. Despair choked her. Then a tremor. A minuscule, shuddering breath lifted the tiny ribcage. It was alive. Barely. Carefully, gently, her hands shaking, she scooped the fragile creature up. It was lighter than a handful of feathers, cold to the touch, its fur stiff with dust and what looked like dried something. Milk? Its eyes were tightly closed, crusted shut. It didn't cry. It barely breathed. The utter vulnerability of it, lying in her palm, was a physical blow. This was what the Ginger Tom had led her to? This tiny, fading spark? As she cradled the kitten against her chest, trying to share her warmth, her flashlight beam swept across the cavity where the kitten had lain. Something else lay there, half buried in the dust. Not debris, a small, rectangular shape, an old, leather-bound notebook? Or perhaps a photograph frame. Before she could reach for it, a low, guttural yowl shattered the tense quiet. Not from the kitten, from above, from the hallway. Alara froze, listening. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the creaky boards of the hall towards the parlor. Not hers, not the Ginger Tom's. Someone else was in the house. Someone who shouldn't be. The hairs on her neck stood on end. The kitten whimpered feebly against her shirt. The footsteps paused just outside the parlor door. Silence stretched, thick and menacing. Alara held her breath, clutching the dying kitten. Her eyes locked on the doorway's dark rectangle. Who was there? What did they want? And why did they come now, in this moment of terrifying vulnerability? The doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately. The metallic click was deafening in the stillness. Alara shrank back, pressing herself, and the kitten against the cold stone of the hearth, her mind racing. Escape routes? Weapons? The door started to swing inward. casting a long, ominous shadow across the dusty rug and the open, gaping hole in the floor. The figure stepped into the doorway, silhouetted against the dim hall light. Tall, broad-shouldered, unrecognizable in the gloom. Ilara's blood ran cold. She opened her mouth, a scream trapped in her throat just as the man spoke, his voice, low and rough. "Well now," he rasped, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on the hole, on the tool in her hand, and finally, chillingly, on the tiny bundle clutched protectively against her chest. "Look what the cat dragged in, or rather, what you dragged out." His eyes narrowed, devoid of warmth. "Mrs. Henderson hid her secrets well. Seems you found one. Give it here." Ilara recoiled, tightening her grip on the fragile life in her hands. The kitten's breathing hitched, a tiny wet rattle. The man took a step forward, his hand outstretched, not towards her, but towards the dying kitten. The air crackled with threat. The ginger Tom was nowhere to be seen. The mysterious object lay forgotten in the dark cavity. The only sound was the terrifyingly weak gasp of the kitten and the heavy tread of the stranger's boot on the wooden floor as he advanced. The man's shadow stretched across the dusty rug, engulfing Ilara and the fragile life she cradled. His outstretched hand, thick-fingered and calloused, hovered near the kitten's matted fur. Ilara's breath caught, her back pressed painfully against the cold hearthstones. The tiny creature in her hands gave another wet, rattling gasp, its minuscule body trembling violently against her palm. Every instinct screamed to shield it, to curl around it like a human fortress. "Give it," the man repeated, his voice a low growl that vibrated in the oppressive silence. His eyes, now adjusted to the gloom, were hard flint, scanning the room. The open hole, the discarded tools, the photograph frame she'd glimpsed moments before, now lying forgotten near the edge of the cavity. "That belongs with the rest." "Rest of what?" Ilara managed, her voice thin but defiant. "Who are you?" Panic was a live wire under her skin, but beneath it surged a fierce protectiveness. This scrap of life needed her. Now. "Name's Briggs," he said, taking another deliberate step closer. The floorboard groaned under his weight. "Worked for the old lady. Handyman. Fixer." A humorless smirk twisted his lips. "Knew she hid things. Stubborn old bat." His gaze flickered back to the hole. "Thought it was valuables. Jewelry, cash, silly, old stories." He gestured impatiently at the kitten. That's just proof she was crazier than they said. Now hand it over." "Proof?" The word echoed chillingly. Ilara clutched the kitten tighter, feeling the terrifyingly faint pulse against her thumb. Its breathing was shallower, more labored. She needed warmth, fluids, a vet, now. Briggs blocked the only exit. Desperation clawed at her throat. "It's dying," she rasped. "It needs help. Get out of my way." Briggs chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Dying things don't need help, girl. They need finishing. Clean slate." He lunged, not for her, but for the kitten, his hand snaking out with surprising speed. Ilara reacted on pure adrenaline. She twisted sideways, shielding the kitten with her body, and kicked out wildly with her foot. Her heel connected hard with Briggs's shin. He roared in pain and surprise, stumbling back a step, momentarily off balance. It was the only opening she needed. Scrambling to her feet, Clutching the kitten like the most precious, fragile secret in the world, she bolted past him, shoulder barging his bulk in her desperation. She heard his enraged curse as she flew down the hall, the heavy front door her only beacon. She didn't look back. She fumbled with the ancient latch, heart hammering against her ribs like a frantic drum, the kitten's weak gasps a terrifying counterpoint. The door finally yielded with a protesting shriek. Cold, rain-scented air hit her face as she stumbled out onto the porch and down the steps, running towards her car parked at the curb. She risked a glance back. Briggs stood silhouetted. In the doorway, his face a mask of fury, but he didn't follow. He just watched, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. Slamming the car door, Alara gently placed the shivering kitten, wrapped in the edge of her shirt, onto the passenger seat. Its eyes were still crusted shut, its breathing agonizingly shallow. "Hold on, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Just hold on." She gunned the engine, tires screeching as she peeled away from the curb, leaving the dark, brooding silhouette of Mrs. Henderson's house and the menacing figure in its doorway behind. The drive to the emergency vet was a blur of rain-slicked streets and choked sobs. Every red light felt like an eternity. She kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting lightly on the tiny, cold body beside her, whispering useless reassurances. "You're not alone. I've got you. Please, please hold on." The kitten didn't respond. Its stillness was terrifying. At the clinic, the fluorescent lights were harsh, the air sharp with antiseptic. Alara burst through the doors, cradling the kitten. "Help! Please! It's trapped! It's freezing! It can't breathe!" The receptionist's eyes widened. Within seconds, a tech in blue scrubs was gently taking the tiny bundle from her trembling hands, whisking it through swinging doors marked treatment. The sudden emptiness in Alara's arms was profound. She sank into a plastic chair, staring numbly at the speckles on the linoleum floor. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving her shaking and hollow. What if she was too late? What had Briggs meant? What? Was the photograph? Hours crawled by. Alara paced the small waiting room, jumping every time the doors swung open. The vet, Dr. Evans, a woman with kind, tired eyes, finally emerged. Alara rushed towards her, her heart in her throat. "Is it alive?" Dr. Evans said, her voice measured but holding a note of cautious relief. "Barely. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition, lungs are congested, likely aspirated fluid or dust. Eyes are badly infected and..." She paused, her expression grave. "There are signs of prolonged neglect before it was trapped. It's a fighter, but it's touch and go. We're warming it, giving fluids and oxygen, treating the infections. The next 24 hours are critical." Alara swayed, relief warring with dread. Alive, but fighting for every breath. Dr. Evans guided her to a small, dimly lit recovery room, and there, in an incubator warmed by soft light, lay the kitten. Tubes snaked from its tiny body, an IV, oxygen prongs taped near its nose. Its fur had been gently cleaned, revealing a beautiful, intricate pattern of black, orange, and cream beneath the grime. Its eyes were still closed, bandaged, but its tiny chest rose and fell with shallow, rhythmic breaths. It looked heartbreakingly fragile, yet there was a fierce will in its stillness. Alara pulled a chair close to the incubator. She reached a finger slowly through the access port, gently resting it near the kitten's front paw. She didn't stroke, just offered the warmth and presence. For long minutes, there was only the soft hum of the machines and the kitten's shallow breathing. The kitten stirred. Its tiny head turned minutely towards her finger. Its bandaged face seemed to sense her. A minuscule, rasping purr vibrated against her skin. Alara's breath caught. It was the faintest sound, barely audible, over the machines, but it resonated deep within her. A fragile thread of connection spun in the sterile air. It knows I'm here. Hours blurred into a vigil. Alara didn't leave. She watched the monitors, flinching when the kitten's breathing hitched. Nurses came and went, adjusting fluids, checking vitals. Dr. Evans returned, her expression softening slightly. "Purring is a good sign," she murmured, "a very good sign." Later, during a quiet moment, Alara carefully dipped a tiny sponge in electrolyte solution offered by a nurse. Guided by the nurse's instructions, she gently touched it to the kitten's lips. A tiny pink tongue, impossibly small, flickered out, tasting the moisture. Then, weakly, the kitten began to suckle at the sponge. A surge of pure, fierce joy washed over Alara, so potent it brought fresh tears. She was helping it. It was accepting her help. Trust. The night was long. Alara dozed fitfully in the chair, her hand still near the incubator. She woke to a soft, chirping sound. Blinking, she looked inside. The bandages were off one eye. A single, clouded blue eye was open, staring directly at her. It wasn't a look of fear, but of profound, quiet recognition. A silent acknowledgement, passing between them in the hushed early morning light filtering through the blinds. You are mine, and I am yours. The shared journey through terror had forged an unbreakable bond. Dawn painted the sky in pale pinks and oranges when Dr. Evans returned, smiling genuinely this time. "She's turned a corner," she announced. "Lungs are clearing, temperature's stable. She's taking small amounts of formula willingly. She's not out of the woods, but the woods are thinning considerably." Alara looked at the tiny tortoise shell. Willow, the name came to her suddenly, unbidden, for the fragile strength that bends but doesn't break. Taking Willow home days later felt like carrying the most precious, hard-won treasure. The Victorian house loomed, but Briggs hadn't returned. The police, alerted by Alara, had found no trace of him. The hole in the parlor floor gaped like a wound. Remembering the photograph, Alara carefully retrieved it from the dusty cavity. It was an old, sepia-toned picture in a simple wooden frame, protected by glass. It showed a much younger Mrs. Henderson, radiantly happy, holding a beautiful calico cat, unmistakably Marmalade. Beside her stood a man Alara didn't recognize, smiling warmly. And nestled in Mrs. Henderson's lap, a tiny ginger kitten. One ear already had a distinctive, familiar notch. Alara's breath hitched. The ginger Tom. He wasn't just a stray. He was Marmalade's kitten, Willow's sibling. He'd led her to his trapped sister. He'd known. Briggs's words echoed. Proof she was crazier than they said. But looking at the photograph, Alara saw only love. Mrs. Henderson had cherished her cats deeply. Had Marmalade hidden Willow under the floor when she felt death approaching? Had the ginger Tom been watching, waiting for someone he could trust to help? Weeks passed. Willow grew stronger under Alara's devoted care. Her eyes cleared to a bright, intelligent green. Her purr became a robust engine. She followed Alara everywhere, a tiny shadow full of newfound energy and trust. The Victorian house, once echoing with silence, began to fill with the sounds of life. Alara's movements, Willow's playful pounces on dust motes, the comforting rumble of her purr. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden light streamed through the parlor windows, Alara sat on the repaired floor, Willow curled contentedly in her lap. The photograph of Mrs. Henderson, Marmalade, the unknown man, and the ginger kitten sat on the mantelpiece. A sense of peace, hard-won and deep, settled over the room. A soft scratching sounded at the French doors leading to the garden. Alara looked up. There, silhouetted against the falling leaves, sat the ginger Tom. He watched them through the glass, his golden eyes unreadable. Willow lifted her head, her tiny ears pricking forward. She let out a soft, questioning chirp. The ginger Tom stared for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he dipped his head. Not a bow, but an acknowledgement. A silent transfer of responsibility. He held Alara's gaze for a heartbeat longer, then turned and melted into the rustling autumn leaves, a phantom guardian whose mission, at last, was complete. Alara looked down at Willow, who had snuggled back into her lap, purring. She stroked the soft fur, her finger tracing the unique tortoiseshell pattern. The mystery of the ginger Tom, the threat of Briggs, the heartbreaking fragility of that first faint meow, it all coalesced into a profound sense of belonging. She hadn't just saved a life. She had found a purpose, a connection that spanned generations of silent feline devotion and human compassion. The world breaks everyone, Alara thought, holding Willow close, feeling the strong, steady heartbeat against her own, and afterward, some are stronger in the broken places, and in the quiet heart of the old house, where dust motes danced in the sunlight and the ghost of a guardian. Tom watched from the fading garden. The faintest meow had woven a tapestry of rescue, revealing that sometimes the strongest magic is simply the courage to listen to the smallest voice, and the fiercest love is born in the darkest places. Hope, Alara knew, watching Willow chase a sunbeam, often wears fur and purrs.